concern. Thank you so much for joining us on Ubuntu Radio.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to join you.
Yeah, no, really a pleasure for you to make time, because we know that just how busy the work of the G20 is and the program in large. And in South Africa, is chairing the South Africa I-20 this year. Can you share with us and our listeners what the SAI-20 is and why is it important and within the broader G20 South Africa's presidency framework?
Yes, it is. It's quite a privilege for our Auditor General to chair the SAI-20. SAI-20 is essentially the supreme audit institutions or national audit offices, if you like, of the G20 countries. So in common language, it's the AG offices of all the G20 countries. It's an interesting group of people. We always say if we compare ourselves to the bigger profession, there's only one of us in the country. So if you want National Audit Office, we are 195 in the world. So we know what it is to rely on each other. That makes us quite unique. And I think it also makes us unique in the SAI-20 context. We understand the need for us to lobby together on topics, to inspire ourselves to do better when we audit certain areas, but also to use what we audit to the benefit of government. So there's a definite expectation from our side that we should have a voice to government. There's a beautiful phrase in one of our audit standards that say, our audit insights should lead to government foresight. And that's really what this game is about. In a broader context, I think it's also right that when government speak about issues that affect the citizens, that the whole accountability ecosystem is there. So it's not just government. Private sector's got a space in B20, I would imagine. There's the C20, the civil society. So there's got to be size. We've got a unique place within that accountability ecosystem. Our game is assurance, public trust. And I think it's a necessary ingredient of a full package that the G20 president would want to put on the table. So I think it's important to have full representativity.
I mean, what significance does South Africa, plays in its role as a host of SA I-20, especially within the context of G20 theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainability? I know a lot of people have been focused on that in terms of we must not divide. How does then this theme talks about what you are doing specifically?
Look, and this theme resonates so well with Supreme Audit institutions. I think what makes us unique in the world of audit is the fact that we understand public interest very well. If you an auditor of a private entity, you're probably worried about the share price, right, or the perceptions of the stakeholders. We worry about the perception of a citizen. And I think wherever you go in the world, when you speak to an Auditor General, he or she would probably reflect on the fact that the work they do should touch the lived realities of the people out there. If you don't, you're in trouble. And the moment you say that, then this team just speaks to us. So it made for such a easy connection. If it was ever a question of whether we'd step up the moment we saw the theme, that just made sense. And it made the selection of topics so much easier. It talks about a broad range of issues that could have a very direct effect on the citizen.
Talking about topics, the two core themes under the discussion as far as your work is concerned: unlocking infrastructure funding, bridging the skills gap. What informed those sort of issues as well? These are quite critical. Infrastructure funding. Everyone is talking about then we cannot actually develop if our infrastructure is not up to the par.
Well, you're right. You've almost given the answer, right? These are the big game changers. So I can give you a theoretical answer and say we've looked at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and these themes would scream out of there, right? It's very obvious that they can influence such a lot of other things. Similarly, you can look at development goals, country development goals across the globe. You'll find the themes coming from there. We also had a good look at what the G20 has done over the years, partly to just create context to our work, but you very quickly realize that they were on about these two themes as game changers as well. So for us, the potential to pick two themes in a very small period of time that you have to work and still make a difference is huge. You said earlier on, it's a busy time. Our summit event is coming up next week. So we had to crunch a lot of work around the two themes from December last year to now. So short period of time, what's your maximum return? You almost inevitably end up with these two themes. And the knock-on effect for citizens is huge.
Ready for next week?
Yes. Yes.
I love the direct answer. It's not like, well, we still have to teeth out one or two. We're still negotiating one or two tracks.
So you've just interpreted what I've said very well, right? A lot of things that still need to come together. No, but the content stuff is settled well, and that's a privilege in this group.
Yeah.
We had such a bunch of strong Supreme Audit institutions that worked with us.
Yeah.
So our process is to start off with country papers. Everybody's own reflection on the topic. We then sit around the table and debate that and see where we can find common ground. That's how we develop theme papers, and that's how we get to our final communique. So that there's this broad range of inputs on this thing. You know what's the really interesting part about it is we thought that there would be big divides between global north and global south.
On the issues.
Think infrastructure. You think Germany, they must be sorted out versus us, right?
First world.
Yet when we started talking, example, they started talking about maintenance of infrastructure. And we thought, well, we talk about bridges that's falling apart, etc., etc. They're talking about heritage assets that's falling apart. Their bridges are old, even older than ours, right? So maintenance, same thing. So the correlation between stuff across the whole of the G20, that was amazing.
Also, then financial institutions need to play a part because the cost of maintenance.
Huge.
It's so huge. And people say, you can build infrastructure, but it's going to cost you more to maintain it. And that's the crux of it. And with costs come, the auditors now come and to say, are you doing things properly?
You see, but that's, I think, the benefit of having AGs on board, first of all.
Yeah.
And it's also the challenge that we had to express to our group. And when we need to lift our own game, you can't just concentrate on one portion of the infrastructure finance game. You can't just say, well, money in, money out, because that's a typical sort of audited domain, right? Okay. So you've got to look at the whole value chain. So you've got to start saying, planning. Is that playing off within a framework that's approved by government? Does it make sense? Will it reach the citizen? What's the project management that go with this? How's the execution? Is that financially good, but it's also good in terms of building standards, for example? And you've got to look at the maintenance, etc., etc., etc. So it is a question of inspiring ourselves to look at the whole value chain and to reflect on that. So if you, just before the interview, you and I started talking about municipalities, right?
Yeah.
And Auditor General Maluleke tabled her report on municipalities a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at this type of whole of government report, it's way beyond the normal auditor ambit of just expressing an audit opinion. It talks. You'll find commentary there about infrastructure, for example, where you can tell the story. And I think that's the benefit in having a public sector auditor on board, is that you get these deeper insights that can help government to get on the right track when they got their ambitious goals.
It looks like from what you're saying, the auditing and all these nitty-gritties that needs to get into funding and projects and all that cannot start right at the end, in the middle. We need to start the process right in the beginning. Involvement of auditing right at the beginning as well. Yeah. That's quite critical.
Look, so a lot of people will talk about real-time auditing. If you think back to COVID times, right? That was the term that we threw around quite a lot. Real-time auditing. As the spending happens, so we can't get our hands dirty in the spending, but you can be right there when it plays off and give a real-time reflection.
Yeah.
It's expensive, probably. It means that you're there the whole time. But that's the ideal. So if you know that you've got big pressure points, big risk areas, or you've got big spending projects, it would make sense to actually have a real-time commitment and be there in all phases. Not just here's the budget, did you spend, can you show me something for the spend?
Yeah.
It's more than that. It's got to be more than that.
And this is the conversation that also is happening around the G20 as well. That's quite important. Now, infrastructure gap are major issues in the continent. I mean, how is SAIs and the likes of the Auditor General help address these challenges on financing, delivering on quality infrastructure in low-income and developing countries? This particularly affects a lot of African countries.
Yeah. Look, so I said to you earlier on, our game is about assurance, right? Building public trust.
Yeah.
And I think when you talk especially about low-income and developing countries, the perception is the risk is too high. Why would I invest in a country where I'm not sure about X, Y, Z as risks? And sometimes I think you run the risk of people backing off before they've really got to grips with, do we have risks? What's the nature of them? Are they managed or not? And I think that's where Supreme Audit institutions are ideally placed, first of all, to demystify what this risk universe is about, but also to then start addressing whether the government is actually doing something about whether they've got it under control or not. So I think that's where the major plus is in demystifying what the risk profile is about that and giving assurance in certain areas. So you'd see it in the world of donor funds. It's something that I've dealt with quite a bit in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Donors want assurance that the money that they spend give them bang for their buck, right?
Yeah.
And more and more you see that donors start asking the question, can I use in-country systems? Can I channel the money through a national treasury? When I need assurance around that, can I use the AG's office for that? And that's the type of thing that I think is ideal. So when there's any investor, whether it's IMF, whether it's World Bank, whether it's any big banking institution in the world, if they want to make that risk decision of shall I invest or not, I think our AG office is ideal to speak about that. If you've done this whole of government or whole of life cycle reflection, you should be in an ideal position to answer that.
Oh, that's interesting. In conversation with Mr. Jan van Schalkwyk, he is with the Auditor General Office in the Republic of South Africa. It's G20 in conversation. South Africa is heading this important grouping this year, and we're just really talking about the work of this working group and what are some of the issues that are coming up. It's a consensus building, and this important meeting that's happening next week as well. They're ready for it, and there's been a lot of work that has been happening behind the scenes. We're quite happy to hear, just get a report in terms of there's a lot of work that South Africa is doing, and because of this number of experience that South Africa has in auditing, but also relationship with other auditing institutions in the continent, it's quite important as well that we says this G20 is not only going to be for South Africa only, it's also going to be for the continent as well. We also want to reflect on the issues of the private sector participation, especially on infrastructure as well. What has been your thinking, your involvement, and some of the issues you can mention around that in terms of the private sector involvement?
Look, private sector involvement is a theme that came through quite strong. So when we did our theme papers, we tried to pose challenges to G20 countries and challenges to ourselves.
Yeah.
And when you start talking about challenges to government, inevitably you're going to stumble on the fact that public-private partnerships can be a solution. We're not in a position where we can facilitate that, but we can certainly do a lot to foster collaboration in that area.
Yeah.
And I think at a very basic level, you'd want to say to private sector, well, we can give you a level of assurance about what would happen to your money in a public sector partnership. There's assurance around the spending. There's a lot of other areas that can also play a role to give comfort to private sector as a partnership. There's, for example, the area of performance auditing. So it is where you would express an opinion on the effective, efficient economic utilization of resources. So it already gives you a value for money type perspective. That's a fantastic benefit to have as an investor, to know that there's a good return on investment. There's the demystifying of what happens in public sector. Private sector so easily you've got their own perceptions. Public sector is different. The legislative frameworks are different, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So the demystifying is a part of it. And then, like my previous answer, I think also the de-risking. Let's just be clear on what's the risks of this partnership and how you address that ideally, or whether it's already addressed and that you should actually not have fears to commit.
Talking about partnership is drawing closer to our conversation. In terms of partnership that you can talk about in the continent and the globe, I mean, I know that within the G20, you've already had, the Auditor General had already have relationship with other countries, even some of the countries in the G20 formation, because as much as we're talking about those important 20 economies, there's already collaboration on a bilateral level as well with some key countries in Europe, also in the African continent. Are you able to reflect on that? That will also allows you to because the relationship exists, in terms of arriving at consensus, like, but we understand each other. South Africa is not new in this kind of environment.
Absolutely. We're not new in this environment. We're proud members of Intersci. That's a worldwide organization that deals with supreme audit institutions. So all 195 national audit offices are part of this thing called Intersci.
Okay.
And it's a unique organization in the sense that we share freely between each other. That's how we get somewhere. We can't easily go borrow or buy from private sector because it wouldn't translate into our environment automatically. So we need to deal with our counterparts. So if you want to talk about methodology, I know I can pick up the phone and phone the Supreme Audit Institution in New Zealand. And they will respond. And they will respond without costing me anything because they know that one day they will have that same need. They'll pick up the phone and come this way. So it's a gentleman agreement of knowledge sharing. So you find many configurations around that. There's Intersci, the global body, but you also find regional bodies. You talked earlier about the fact that we're all proud that the G20 sits in Africa and the continent. So some of the people that we could bring on board as a result of that is the African regional organizations. So for national audit offices, we've got AfroSci. It covers the whole of the continent.
Okay.
But we've also got the language groups. You know the unique challenge in our continent. You've got to be French, Arabic, and English at the very least. Probably Portuguese added in there as well.
Yeah.
Right? And to make sure that we can take the joys of Sci 20 to the whole of the continent, we started involving those regional bodies into the Sci 20. So we also know that their inputs are reflected. There's also benefits that can flow to them. For that matter, a fantastic story is on AfroSci East. So it's the English-speaking side of these national audit offices in Africa. They have a governing board meeting every year where there's 26, 27 AGs that actively participate. Normally I have theme discussions at these sessions. And this year, we were still in the early stages of doing our work in Sci 20. I said, well, it just makes sense to adopt the Sci 20 themes. It gave us a very easy testing ground for the relevance of our themes. It led to a full day of discussions. It's actually concluded with AGs saying, hang on, we can't afford to just stop after a day. This is going to continue. The themes are relevant. The type of interaction that we're getting is relevant. So to us, it confirmed the relevance of our themes, but it also, on a broader basis, confirmed the relevance of Sci 20 per se, right, over all the years. So the beauty, again, about Intusci, all these regional bodies, is that we're in a commitment to freely share knowledge, to freely share around capacity development of standards, etc. So it's old colleagues around the table. And
that's what I was saying, yeah.
Partly that makes for easy consensus.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's interesting that there's enough differences to still make sure that this is robust. An easy example is compare us. We've still got the Westminster system of auditing, right?
Yeah.
Sort of essentially a colonial English type thing, versus the Francophones that set up their audit offices as courts. You can imagine a court arguing with an audit office. Something unique is going to emerge out of that, right? But that's the benefit. Yes, we know each other. Consensus is easy. We're in the same game, but we're different enough to still make for very robust, in-depth discussion.
Oh, this is quite interesting. Well, it's good to hear this amount of work that has been happening as well. And we are quite happy that here on Ubuntu Radio we're able to take it to the African continent as well for them to hear why we just not putting... we are putting really these plans in action, that we don't talk about foreign policy in a vacuum, that we say in the sector of auditing, there's already collaboration in the continent, already collaborating in Europe, so it's not really just about us sharing in a virtual, in a virtual, but there's something meaningful that's been happening as well. Key outcomes,
Key outcomes. Summit is playing off next week. We hope that by the end of the week we've got a confirmed communique that can go out. We're quite confident because we've had the process of consultation building up over the last 6 months. It would express views around both themes.
Okay.
And within each of the themes, like I said earlier, there's a challenge to governments and there's a challenge to ourselves. In an ideal world, that's the document that we then want to throw into the bigger processes that need to move on until the Heads of State event in November. But it also gives us a beautiful opportunity to engage wider. Up to now, our focus has really been on let's get the content and get to a point where we can express a view. Now we can start doing the advocacy. We can start partnering up with other engagement groups. We can start making the debate wider. And that's really where a lot of our time will go. We face a unique challenge that at the moment it's 20 Supreme Audit institutions. But our universe is actually 195. So we also got to find ways of taking this to the whole of Intusci. So there's a lot of work cut out for us. And of course, we want to be in a situation where a couple of years down the line we can step back and say, well, let's reflect. Did this make a difference? That's the beauty. Sci 20 has been around for 4 years. So people like the first chairs, say Indonesia, are in a position where next year they can reflect. They can say, well, it's been 4 years since we made our first declarations, our first communique. Let's start reflecting whether people has actually responded to this. Can we see a difference in the way that we operate, our colleagues operate, or our governments operate? So that's the ideal commitment, is that you can both be there with your communique and that the communique is relevant to G20, but also that you can reflect on whether you had an impact and that you keep on challenging yourself to be better at this relevance game.
Well, it does show that South Africa really, living the fact that we are taking over from our fellow, relations in the South, in the global South. To say we are carrying on to some of the thematic issues that were carrying in Indonesia and in Brazil. Yes, coming to this. So we are hoping that in the next year as well, you see United States carrying on this thing, because their continuing to participation is quite important as well. I mean, finally, what message would you like to leave for South African citizens about the value of their country hosting this Site 20 and the role that South Africa, I mean, in terms of just at the end, what would you like to see?
That's a big question.
It's a big one, yes.
It's a big question. Look, allow me to step back for a moment. I mean, it's a proud moment for South Africa to be take on the presidency of the G20, right? And it says such a lot of things about South Africa as a country. It says something about South Africa's international standing. It says something about the skills, the ability to bring people together, to lobby for certain things. And hopefully that's something that South African citizens are very proud of and rate high as something that inspire confidence in the people that lead. And I think the same thing goes for us in the SAI community. It's to inspire trust around the fact that this institution, and remember we position as an institution that's there to protect democracy, but this institution is in a good space, us and our colleagues on the continent and in the world. And hopefully that inspires at least two things around AG offices in the world and in South Africa. The first one is that we take the outcomes of these audit offices serious. There's good intelligence that go into those processes, and it's worthwhile to attend to some of the findings. But I suppose there is another area to it as well, a little bit broader, is to make sure that we protect these institutions. So if you think about the ombudsman function throughout the continent, you think about public protectors, you think about human rights commissions, you think about the Auditor General offices. These are important elements of a democracy, right? And that's the thing that keeps the balance going. Government versus these bodies that's there to protect the democracy. I think the big thing would be is that citizens value that and protect that. That when they hear that these bodies are independent or funded, etc., that they're serious about maintaining that situation, that these bodies can still be there and serve this necessarily balancing act. So, trust. That's what it's about. Be proud, because you sit with trusted environments.
Well, in South Africa, it's the month of June right now. Young people will not forgive me for not asking you. We've got a lot of young van Schalkwyk in this country who will want to venture into a career in auditing as well. Rewarding career, how difficult it is to get into. We've got young people that say, I also want to be an auditor one day. Skills. Your career started as early as 1991. And I mean,
it's been a long while.
Reflect on your journey in the country and just what it takes to get to where you are.
Look, let me first of all say that private sector, it's about shareholder pricing, it's about investments that you protect. On our side, more the public interest side. Let me talk more about the public sector side, because I think that's the interesting thing. That's where you move away from just debits and credits, right? It's where you move away from just pure audit opinions. This is where you really can talk about your work, your debits and credits, as it relates to the citizen. So if you feel something for your country, if you're proud about your country and you want to keep that pride going, if you're proud of a young South African democracy and you want to protect that and make it strong, this is the place to be. That is literally where day to day you can say, I did X, Y, Z, it translated into that in the audit report. I can see that minister actioning it, and it makes South Africa a better place. That's immensely rewarding. I grant you that may not be in everybody's DNA, but if you're one of those people that worry about those people around you, you worry about the democracy, you worry about benefits to citizens, you want the sustainability of what's happening around us, no better place to get your hands dirty than right here. I got a pitch for the AGSA. It's a fantastic organization in the sense that we run the same type of training that you would get at a Deloitte or a KPMG, etc. So the chartered accountants of tomorrow, they can choose a route through a Deloitte or a KPMG, but they can equally choose a route through the AGSA. You end up with the same CA qualification. There's a couple of equivalent variants as well. Very credible environment. The trick that I always ask to the students is, do you want to cruise through your 3 years and just have an easy road? Just see unqualified audit opinions, everything is clean. You want to get your hands dirty. Do you really want to learn about things? In our environment, you learn about things. You'll find interesting challenges. All the challenges that you and I spoke about now, that's things that will confront you on a day-to-day basis. No better learning ground than AGSA. Seriously consider it.
Oh, no, that's good. That's a very good pitch. It's a good pitch. Thank you so much for your time. Really
Thank you for the
appreciate it.
opportunity.
And there's a lot of we'll bring you back. Your office needs to come back and explain this issue of qualified, unqualified, because we in the media also we do public diplomacy. We got our hands cut out to explain. Say, oh, you got an audit finding. What does it mean?
You should just never make it too difficult. Unqualified is good. The rest is bad.
Can you repeat that?
Unqualified is good. Unqualified with any findings is superb.
Okay.
The rest is all bad news.
Okay. I think it's a good way to leave it. Good way with the work that you're doing within the Side 20. Thank you so much for available to speak to us here on Ubuntu Radio. Really appreciate for you to join us.
Thank you. All the best.
All right.